In 2011, the Parliament of Georgia passed a series of laws countering Olympic Games in Sochi in order to make Russia return quasi-occupied South Ossetia and Abkhazia to Tbilisi. Due to the efforts of Washington and Brussels, the Circassians question was chosen as the main means of political leverage. Tbilisi hastily adopted the resolution pact with a quest of facts concerning that alleged historic crime. The United States, European Union and Turkey supported the Circassian diasporas with money and helped organizing ongoing protests and forums destined to show that bloody barbarian Jews of the Russians. The closer Olympic Games were, the louder the sound of their wailing came, and when the Games happened, there was triumph for the Russians in all senses. But why were the Circassians suddenly forgotten? And only when the Turkish President Erdogan understood that he made a great mistake of all his life by sponsoring terrorists in Syria and hitting the Russian strike fighter Su-24, Ankara suddenly came to remember that there were the Circassians in the world, and it was high time to make use of them again. Coming on Russia to Caucasus could not be equal to how the European colonizers came to America and India, and how the German Nazis occupied the Eastern Europe. The Caucasus population in the 18th and 19th century were considered by the Russian Empire leaders as self-dependent subjects of the regional politic, involved into wars, peace agreement conclusions, military alliances, and trivial trade. At the same moment, everyone knows the cruel fate of the North American Indians when the colonizers came, and what happened to the citizens of the Soviet Union, Poland and Yugoslavia under the Nazi occupation in the years of the Second World War. There was nothing in common during the Caucasus Wars, though the Caucasus Wars were certainly a tragedy for all the people involved in them. All the opposing sides resorted to atrocity and inhumanity in their activities, and in this case, one cannot call one side an absolute victim and the other one absolute killer, an aggressor. The term genocide means any of the acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. The Russian Empire did not have such a goal regarding neither the Circassians nor any other ethnos, in contrast to the Hitler's Germany, where the policy of destroying nations was brought to the level of a national idea. The Caucasus War was not of the inter-ethnic character. It was generally caused by conflicts of interest between large empires such as Ottoman Empire and Russia. But France and British Empire indirectly encouraged them too. The Russian Empire, with its numerous ethnic groups and religions, had never been aiming at destroying Caucasus population. The only goal of the Russian presence in the North Caucasus was maintenance of the safe transport link with Georgia and access to the Black and Caspian Seas in order to protect Russian borders from Persians and Ottomans, who were always the most dangerous neighbors due to the ongoing support of the Western states. Till the end of the first decade of the 19th century, the Russian policy in Caucasus was exclusively defensive. During 50 years, which some experts, especially American and Turkish ones, included to the so-called Caucasus War and called it genocide, the Russians lived on the right bank of the Kuban River and never crossed it to conquer the Circassians' land. During that period, it was not so much that Russia made war, it was even trying to trade with the Circassians, avoiding conflicts. At the same time, the natives took up fights themselves. In those days, the Circassians viewed Russian villages on the right bank of the Kuban as a very good target for their forest system of management, and brigandise of neighboring people was a very important part of their life support. Forays and slave-taking were considered by the local tribes as an honorable business, a kind of cult, since, according to a number of slaves, economic and social levels of the persons were determined. But as a rule, fate of the victims was very sad. They were brought to the coast and sold into Ottoman slavery. The Russian government continued diplomatic efforts to quit raids and other violent activities of the most outrageous Circassian communities. In 1961 and 1962, it was the Russian Emperor Alexander II personally met with the several Circassian leaders. He was trying to persuade them to stop resistance. He guaranteed them that they would keep their own self-government under the Russian Empire sovereignty. Before the Russians came to Caucasus, the Adig tribes were not united. It was confirmed by all the scientists and travelers who visited the North Caucasus. Different social and national groups were fighting each other, and it was a great obstacle in the way of creating a real state. Therefore, since there was no United Nations by the time the war began, it is improper to call the Caucasus War neither People's One nor the war between the Russians and the Circassians. And to a great extent it turned out to be a civil one, since thousands of addicted Muslims were in service of the Russian Empire. A great number of usual highlanders passed over to the Russian troops to become Cossacks, since they dreamt of a personal freedom and getting out of the slavery system. It continued even when the Imam Shamil declared jihad and the war became religious. Russia, in contrast to Turkey and Middle East countries, was always ensuring the Circassians made a significant growth in its development as any other ethnos living here. The Russian Circassians obtained their own written language, they were given an opportunity to receive an appropriate education to develop their culture, science and literature. Consequently, it helped forming the Circassians intellectuals. The Soviet Union gave people their own national administrative regions with the Circassian population. These are Abkhazia, Adygay, Kabardino-Balkaria, Karachay-Cherkessia. As for Turkey or Western countries with less Circassian diasporas, there are no such regions. The Russian Federation still really upholds the rights of the Circassian ethnos. A good example of that is that in 2008 Russia recognized the independence of Abkhazia, which population is descendants of the coastal Circassians. The Georgian parliament that recognized the genocide of the Circassians by the Russian Empire and called Russia colonizer and aggressor on the 20th of May 2011 did not take into consideration an important fact. It was Georgia that was extremely interested in strengthening of Russia in the North Caucasus and its victory in the Caucasus War. Since Georgia itself was under military protectorate of Russia, the Georgian noble class was the main vehicle of the Russian imperial policy, and thousands of the Georgian officers were in the Russian army. Moreover, the Georgian kingdom and principalities were at war with the Highlanders, and they were continuously attacked by them. At the same time, the modern government of Georgia that decided to take role on the main defender of the Circassians shyly keeps secret that numerous representatives of the Georgian elite, being officers of the Russian army, were in the hostilities in the North Caucasus in the 19th century. It appears that Georgia is completely responsible for those events too. Further, a great number of the modern politicians took part in the destroying Abkhazia edicts during the war of 1992-1993 in Abkhazia. Therefore, recognizing the imaginary genocide of Circassians by the Georgian leaders is distinct from reality. For the last 5 years, there are continuous talks about creating an independent Circassian state at the expense of the Russian territory. However, majority of the Russian Circassians fight that idea since they understand that only Russia respects rights of ethnic groups, not upon words but upon deeds. The numerous Russian nationalities have real possibilities to learn their history, culture and traditions and speak their native languages. The efforts of the United States and their satellites promoting an idea of the Circassian genocide are motivated not by care of that ethnos, but by their own geopolitical interests in confrontation with Russia in Caucasus. And the critical situation with the refugees in Europe that was provoked by the United States and Turkish policy in the Middle East requires an immediate decision. Since there is no potential to accept a huge number of refugees, some European countries, led by Germany, keep on trying to redirect these refugees flows to Russia under pretense of helping Syrian Circassians returning to their historical homeland. As a result, at the expense of Russia, some leaders of Western Europe hope to kill two birds with one stone, to ease the migrant situation in Europe and to complicate situation in the North Caucasus, since Russia can be invaded by the terrorists of the Daesh in the guise of Syrian refugees.